Welcome back to Race Report, everyone. That is the Dutch Grand Prix in the bag for the first time in a long time for the 2021 season. And let's get stuck straight into reviewing how that went. Firstly, let's just say it was terrific to see the track at Zandvoort. It was so beautiful to see all the banking, all the elevation changes. It's a beautiful, beautiful track, and the fans there were amazing all weekend. It was really, really good to see. But the best news of all, we actually had a race. That's right. It feels like we've been waiting an age for this now, after the fiasco that was last week in Belgium and also the summer break before that. It feels like it's been a long time since we've just had a good old proper race. That's exactly what we got today. But we'll start at the beginning of the weekend. There was a few things coming into the weekend from Media Day and from the Friday that did play a part. Obviously, the first of those was Raikkonen confirming his retirement at the end of the season. Bit of a shock that it happened at this race. Everybody thought it was going to happen at Monza next week, but that will start the driver domino effect in the coming days, in the coming weeks as well. So it's going to be very exciting from here on out. Do stay tuned for a couple of news videos I'm sure I will get to make there about some moves. But then we also had the follow-up, I think literally a day later, with Raikkonen out with COVID. Could not qualify and he could not do the race. He was replaced by, of course, Robert Kubica. So it was great to see Robert back in the car as well. And throughout the practice sessions, we actually saw a worrying trend of a red flag in every practice session. And that also carried into qualifying as well, where we saw 2 red flags, both in Q2 and qualifying. We seem to have had a lot of trouble with red flags over the course of the season, don't you think? I feel like we've had way more this season than we have had in previous seasons. Bit of a worrying trend, something to keep an eye on for sure. Qualifying wasn't a very interesting one. It was interesting to see all the different lines people were taking, especially around the banked corners. And there was a few shocks as well. We saw Giovinazzi, who's obviously racing for his career right now, put in a brilliant performance to qualify in 7th. We saw Gasly also qualifying 4th. Brilliant. Like, he's at the moment questioning, why aren't Red Bull picking me right now? Qualifying in 4th. Brilliant stuff from him. At the same time, Perez is going out in Q1. That was the big shock from Q1. We also saw Vettel go out as well in Q1 because he was held up by the 2 Haas cars. A bit of tension going on between Mazepin and Schumacher at that team for sure right now. Like I mentioned earlier, in Q2 there was 2 red flags. One for Russell sliding into the barriers. He managed to keep his car going. And then again when Latifi also slid into the barriers. That time it was a big hit. Thankfully he was okay and he could continue, but his car was destroyed and the session wasn't resumed, dropping out a few of the guys who were waiting on a final run, like Norris for instance. Got a feel for Williams after that. They've been double point scorers in the last 2 races, and then they're coming into this race and they have repair bills on both of their cars in qualifying. Ouch. One final note from qualifying is that Verstappen was dominant. This home Grand Prix for him has given him all this extra energy, and it just looked like he was never not going to be on pole. The race was a very similar story. He just took off from the lead, and Hamilton was getting close at points, but to be honest, it looked like Verstappen had it all under control for the entire race, and he is the winner at the Dutch Grand Prix. That must be a fantastic feeling for him, so that's brilliant. The race itself wasn't too eventful from on-track action. There was a few guys that were doing the majority of the overtaking. I think Perez was definitely up there. Perez started from the pit lane, and he managed to get himself up into the points. He was an overtaking machine, but it was only really him, Alonso, and Norris that were doing any of the real overtaking on track. The majority of the work was actually being done in strategy. I don't know if it's the case that we've never been here before in this era, so people didn't know what the tyres to use, what the strategies were, that kind of thing. Because we saw a 1-stop work and we saw a 2-stop work, and we also saw all 3 compounds of tyres being used as well, soft, medium and hard, and they were all working as well. So it was, from a strategy point of view, it must have been almost mind-boggling with the amount of options, because usually when you come to a track, you know how many stops you want to do, and you know which two tyre compounds you want to use. And that's usually like a very set thing. Whereas this was like very up in the air at all times, even down to the small details, like the big banked corner, I think it's turn 3. We saw inconsistent lines going through there. So some people were going high, some people were going low. And it was just very interesting, the amount of variables the race was throwing up for us at that time. But like I said, not a lot of on-track action. Even at the start, I did think, because we've not had a start in a while, obviously with last race not happening, not being a real race, and then the summer break, maybe a bit of rust has settled in, what's going to happen here? But really, it was a very clean start. There wasn't even much position change. I think Alonso moved up 2 places. He was the big winner. There was a few touches here and there, but nothing really significant. So everybody got away cleanly and pretty much maintained their positions. It wasn't until the pit stop started to roll around we started to see interesting things happening. So we saw Mercedes switch Hamilton to a 2-stop. So he pulled in on lap 21 for his first stop, but they managed to leave Bottas out for a 1-stop to try and hold up Verstappen. So Mercedes really pulling out all the stops to try and hold up Verstappen, to try and lose him the race essentially. And of course, it's not something Red Bull could match either, because Perez was so far down the field. Verstappen was on his own fighting to Mercedes, and he's got Hamilton doing a 2-stop, which will theoretically be faster at the end of the race. He's got Bottas doing a 1-stop, which will theoretically hold him up for the middle of the race. Red Bull decided to cover off Hamilton's move and bring Verstappen in on a 2-stop as well. So at that point, it was all about him closing down Bottas, getting past as quickly as possible, and not letting Hamilton get too close. Now, Hamilton did get very, very close, but crucially did not get past. Bottas was pretty much non-existent for the rest of the race. This was kind of his one thing that he had to do as well. He just was very anonymous in 3rd place. The second stop for Hamilton and Verstappen again was very interesting. It happened on lap 40, and don't forget we've got 72 laps. So Hamilton comes on lap 40 and straps on medium tyres, whereas Verstappen straps on hard tyres. And this is where it got interesting, because remember earlier I was saying like all 3 compounds were working, so there was no really significant pace difference between Hamilton and Verstappen. Hamilton did close that gap, but not enough to be able to get past Verstappen on his hard tyres. Of course, in the end he had to back off because the hard tyres can go a lot longer and a lot harder than the medium tyres can. That's kind of how it sat in the end. Hamilton did take the fastest lap, but because he had to back off, there was no really like end of the race drama between those two. At the end of the day, Verstappen and Red Bull were just better. They were faster, they covered off the strategy, they won. There's a few notes up and down the field. One was Norris. He did his first stop on lap 44, really working his first set of mediums very well, bringing him back into contention. He started in 13th. He managed to jump a couple of people up into 11th with that stop, right behind Ricciardo. Of course, Ricciardo let him past into 10th. Suddenly he's in the points. That was a brilliant long stint from him there. Unfortunately, we didn't see Giovinazzi carry through his pace from qualifying. It's a real shame because, like I said earlier, he was really driving for his job. There are rumours that he will be replaced at Alfa Romeo next season. So seeing that 7th place in qualifying, it's like, hey, somebody's doing well. Somebody wants to keep their job. But then he dropped back in the race, sadly. That was a shame to see. There's a bit of a late flurry of action from Alonso at overtaking Sainz. And from Perez has just been doing his thing all race, overtaking every car he can find. And he just carried on. So that was kind of where our late action was buried. Big shout out to Gasly as well. I mean, he was just on his own, doing his own thing the entire time. He qualified in 4th, brilliant. Nobody really said anything. And then got off the line and just stayed in 4th, just did his thing. Nobody really mentioned it. But Gasly in an AlphaTauri qualifying and finishing 4th on pace is a really, really good move. And yeah, like I said earlier, the fact that he's questioning like, hey, why aren't Red Bull promoting me? Fair play, Gasly. You're higher than Perez was, so well done. But overall, this race was all about Max Verstappen being at his home Grand Prix, absolutely dominating the entire weekend. So congratulations to him. Next week, we're on to the home of Ferrari and Alfa Romeo in Italy at Monza. And we are expecting some contract announcements there, so that will be fun. So stay tuned for me covering that. As for this race, what did you guys think of our first race at Zandvoort in so long? Any takeaways you had from it? Let me know in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching that video. I really do appreciate the support. If you want to see more from me, I'm going to put a couple of extra videos on the left-hand side of the screen here for you. Just go ahead and click on one of those. On the right-hand side of the screen, I'm going to put a subscribe button. If you want to support me and support the channel, I very much appreciate it. Thank you.